Imagine this. You wake up in a quiet room. The air is still. No sounds of the outside world reach you. No ticking clocks. No distant voices. No hum of electronics. Only silence. Something feels off. Your chest tightens with an inexplicable weight, as if the walls are pressing in. But there's nothing visibly wrong. Then you notice it. In the dim light, a shadow flickers across the wall. But it is not cast by you. It moves independently, shifting, twisting, watching. A cold dread settles in your bones as you realize it has always been there, hiding, lurking. Just outside your awareness. You tell yourself it's just a trick of the mind, a fragment of imagination. Yet deep down, something in you knows the truth. This shadow is not just in the room, it is inside you, and it has been waiting. Now pause. Feel that weight in your chest, that unease creeping up your spine. This isn't just a metaphor. It is a reality buried beneath your consciousness. Carl Jung called it the shadow. It is everything you deny, everything you reject, everything you pretend does not exist. The shame, the rage, the unspeakable urges, the terrifying thoughts, the secrets even you hide from yourself. You think you are in control, that you are the sum of your conscious choice. But what if you were wrong? What if the real power, your deepest instincts, your most potent desires, your truest self, resides in the very thing you fear? What if everything in you of the suppressed is not gone, but growing? And what if one day when you'll least expect it, the shadow decides to take control? Think about it. Why do we sometimes snap, saying words we never intended? Why do we sabotage ourselves just as we approach success? Why do seemingly good people commit unthinkable acts? Why do we fear our own reflection? Not the one in the mirror, but the one glimpsed in moments of unfiltered truth. Society teaches you to be good, to be acceptable, to fit into the mold. From childhood, you are conditioned to cut away the parts of yourself that don't belong. The anger, the selfishness, the lust, the cruelty, the wild, untamed forces of nature that exist in all of us. You are told to lock them away, to push them into the abyss. But repression does not kill the shadow. It feeds it. What happens to the things we repress? Do they disappear? Or do they wait, growing stronger, hungrier, more dangerous in the dark? There's a reason nightmares feel so real. There's a reason you sometimes feel like a stranger to yourself. There's a reason that despite all your efforts, you are not as free as you think. Because the truth is, you are not one self. You're two. The person you present to the world and the one you have buried. But here's the great paradox. The more you deny your shadow, the more power it has over you. The more you resist it, the more it consumes you from within. You are afraid to look at it because you believe it is your enemy. But what if, just what if, it is the key to everything you seek? What if the path to true power, to real freedom, lies not in escaping the shadow, but in confronting it? But how? How do you face something you've spent a lifetime avoiding? And once you do, how do you make sure it does not consume you? This is where Carl Jung's greatest insight begins. But before we can understand the way forward, we must first uncover the hidden roots of this unseen force, the dark, ancient origins of why the shadow exists in the first place. Because only by understanding where it comes from can we ever hope to master it. You were never given a choice. From the moment you could walk, talk, and express yourself, the world began shaping you. Parents praised you when you were polite, obedient, and quiet, and they frowned when you were defiant, wild, or unrestrained. Teachers rewarded you for discipline and punished you for aggression. Society whispered its conditions into your ear. Be good, be acceptable, be normal. And so, like everyone else, you will learn to amputate parts of yourself. You silenced the wildness. You hid the anger. You swallowed the tears. The parts of you that did not fit the mold were cast into the dark, buried in the subconscious, locked away in the unseen corners of your mind. Jung called this process the formation of the shadow. And what you do not realize is that in doing so, you created your own prison. The inescapable split. Friedrich Nietzsche warned that the greatest danger to man was ressentiment, a festering, unconscious bitterness born from repression. When you suppress what is natural in you, your desires, your instincts, your rage, it does not disappear, it mutates. It festers beneath the surface, growing into something grotesque, twisted, and volatile. Carl Jung took this further. He argued that repression does not only distort the psyche, it splits it. You think you are one person, but you are not. There's the self you think you are, the curated version, the part you allow others to see, the polite, composed, socially acceptable mask. Jung called this the persona. And then there's everything you have rejected, the aggression, the lust, the selfishness, the untamed emotions, the things you swore you were not. That is the shadow. The more you identify with your persona, the good and acceptable self, the more you alienate your shadow. And yet, paradoxically, the more you try to bury it, the stronger it becomes. Like a pressure cooker with no release valve, it builds instantly, waiting for the perfect moment to break free. This is why you sometimes feel like a stranger to yourself. Why, in moments of stress, you explode in ways you later regret. Why, in the dead of night, unfiltered thoughts creep into your mind, thoughts you do not want to admit you have. Why, in rare moments, you'll glimpse something primal in yourself, something raw, powerful, even terrifying. And yet, society has conditioned you to believe that this force is your enemy, that if you ever unleashed it, it would destroy you. But what if they were wrong? The shadow in history, myth, and culture, this struggle's not new. It is ancient, woven into the myths, religions, and legends of humanity. In Christianity, it is the story of Lucifer, the most radiant angel cast into the abyss because he has dared to embrace his own power. In the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna trembles before his own potential for destruction, fearing the warrior within him. In every hero's journey, the protagonist must descend into darkness, confront their demons, and return transformed. And yet, modern society has stripped us of this understanding. Today, you are told to be good, but you are not taught to be whole. You are given rules, but you are not given wisdom. You are taught to suppress, but never to integrate. And so you're most to remain so unacknowledged, growing stronger, waiting for the moment you are too weak to resist. And then, it takes over. The hidden cost of denial. Jung warned that if you do not confront your shadow, it will live your life for you. Think of the person who preaches morality but hides a double life. The one who condemns others for sins they secretly crave. The one who pretends to be kind but erupts in uncontrollable rage. The more virtuous someone appears, the darker their unseen shadow. This is why hypocrisy is so common. Why those who condemn darkness the loudest often harbor the greatest inner demons. The man who shames others for their desires is often at war with his own. The leader who demands purity is often the most corrupt. The parent who forces perfection onto their child is often haunted by their own failures. The truth is brutal. The shadow does not go away. It only waits. If you ignore it, it will leak out in self-sabotage, toxic relationships, addiction, or sudden bursts of uncontrollable rage. If you deny it, it will manifest as anxiety, depression, or a gnawing emptiness that no success can fill. If you repress it long enough, it will consume you. And this is the hidden problem. The shadow is not your enemy. It is your other half. The world has taught you to fear it. But what if embracing it is the only way to be free? This is where we stand, at the edge of something dangerous, something powerful. The next step is not comfortable, but it is necessary. Because now that you know what the shadow is, you must face the truth of what happens if you continue to ignore it. You might think you've tamed it, that because you buried your shadow deep enough, behind discipline, behind morality, behind years of self-control, it no longer has power over you. But that's the greatest illusion of all. The shadow does not die. It does not disappear. It waits. And in that waiting, it finds its own way to surface. Not as the monstrous force you fear, but in the subtle ways that dictate your entire life without you ever realizing it. The shadow that moves without you knowing. Look closely. Have you ever found yourself doing something completely against your own best interests? Ruining a relationship you actually wanted? Turning down an opportunity you secretly craved? Pushing away a friend for reasons you couldn't explain? Why would you sabotage the very things you claim to desire? Because the shadow, if ignored, becomes the puppet master. And you, the conscious, rational, socially acceptable you, become the puppet. Jung warned of this. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Think of the man who constantly gets overlooked for promotion, not because he lacks skill, but because he secretly fears responsibility. His shadow whispers to him, feeding his self-doubt, making him unconsciously sabotage his own rise. Think of the woman who keeps falling for emotionally unavailable partners, not because she wants to suffer, but because her buried wounds make her chase what will confirm her deepest fears. Think of the person who never allows themselves to be happy, because deep down, their shadow tells them they do not deserve it. We call it bad luck, self-doubt, poor decision-making. But in reality, it is the shadow, moving unseen, shaping our lives in ways we cannot comprehend. The more you reject it, the more it finds ways to own you. The hidden rage of the repressed self. And then there are the moments when the shadow forces its way into the surface. The outburst of anger that seems to come from nowhere. The cold, cutting words you regret the second they leave your mouth. The sudden, overwhelming desire to destroy everything. Your career, your relationship, your own progress. Just to feel something real. This is not randomness. This is the consequence of repression. Jung knew that what we suppress does not dissolve. It erupts. History has proven this over and over again. The most violent atrocities, the darkest movements, the most unthinkable horrors, all began with the repression of the individual shadow, which eventually fused into the collective shadow of entire societies. The more we suppress the dark side of our nature, the more violently it returns. Not only in ourselves, but in the world we create. The shadow of society, we are taught to believe that evil is out there, that it is something external, something that belongs to criminals, tyrants, and monsters. But this is a lie. The most horrific acts in history, the genocides, the wars, the dehumanization, were not committed by monsters. They were committed by people, ordinary people, people who, like you, believed they were good. The Holocaust, the Rwandan genocide, the gulags of Stalinist Russia, the witch hunts, all of them were born from the same psychological error, the refusal to acknowledge the shadow. Entire societies have fallen into darkness because they believed they were above it, because they projected their own denied darkness onto an external enemy, the outsider, the different, the other. Jung saw this coming long before history repeated itself. He warned that the more a person denies their own evil, the more they see it in others. The more a society suppresses its dark instincts, the more it manufactures enemies. This is how the collective shadow forms. When entire cultures, instead of confronting their own darkness, project it onto a scapegoat, a nation, a religion, a race, a political ideology, anything but themselves, because it is easier to fight an external demon than to face the one within. But history has shown time and time again, what we refuse to face will always return, and it will return stronger, angrier, and more uncontrollable than before. The silent war within you. You are not exempt from this. Your shadow, unacknowledged, will shape you if you do not confront your hidden rage. It will leak into your words, your relationships, your actions in ways you do not even perceive. If you do not acknowledge your suppressed desires, they will control your decisions in ways that sabotage you. If you do not face your fears, they will manifest in self-sabotage, procrastination, and endless cycles of regret. So the question is not if your shadow is influencing you. The question is how much, and more importantly, how long will you let it control you before you finally turn around and face it? Because there's only one way out of this silent war, only one way to reclaim your mind, your emotions, your power. You must do what most people never dare. You must rebel against the illusion. You must break the chains of repression. You must confront the shadow directly. But how? How do you stand before the darkness within you without letting it destroy you? That is the next step. And it changes everything. You have spent your entire life running from it, the shadow. You buried it beneath layers of politeness, to discipline and morality and control. You convinced yourself that it was gone, that you were better than it, that it no longer had any power over you. But now you see the truth. It has never left. It has only grown stronger in the dark. And now you stand at a crossroads. You have two choices. You can continue pretending, keep suppressing, keep playing the game society has taught you, avoiding the darkness, denying the truth, living half of a life. Or you can do what almost no one dares. You can turn and face the shadow. You can confront everything you have spent a lifetime avoiding. And in doing so, you can take back your power, the first step. Radical self-confrontation. Most people will never do this because it is terrifying. To look into your own mind, to truly examine the thoughts, impulses, and desires you pretend do not exist, is to strip away the illusions that make life comfortable. Jung called this shadow work, the act of bringing the unconscious into the conscious, the hidden into the seen. It is not easy. It requires brutal self-honesty, a willingness to see yourself fully, without filters, without justification, without excuses. But until you do this, you will never be free, because you cannot escape what you refuse to see. So, how do you begin? Observe your triggers. Pay attention to what enrages you, what disgusts you, what offends you to your core. What qualities in others make your blood boil? What actions fill you with uncontrollable judgment? The shadow hides in these reactions. Jung understood that the things we despise most in others are often reflections of the things we deny in ourselves. The man who condemns weakness was once a powerless child. The woman who ridicules others but desires and suppresses her own. Your triggers are not random, they are mirrors. Examine your patterns, look at the repeated cycles in your life. The relationships that keep failing. The habits that keep sabotaging you. The dreams you keep avoiding. Patterns are the shadow's language. It speaks through repetition, through the wounds, appearing over and over in different forms, until you finally acknowledge them. Write without censorship, take a blank page, and let everything out. The rage, the jealousy, the resentment, the desires you are ashamed to admit, the thoughts you would never say aloud. Do not filter, do not edit. Just write. And when you finish, read what you have written. This is your shadow speaking, and for the first time, you are listening. The second step, integration, not eradication. Most people, when they finally glimpse their shadow, want to destroy it. They see the rage, the selfishness, the darkness, and they panic. They want to cleanse it, purify it, get rid of it forever. This is the mistake. The goal is not to kill the shadow, it is to integrate it. Because the shadow is not just your darkness, it is your power. The aggression you suppress is also your strength. The selfishness you deny is also your ability to set boundaries. The desires you shame are also your passion, your creativity, your drive. The shadow is not evil. It is raw energy. It only becomes destructive when left unconscious. The moment you bring it into the light, when you own it instead of denying it, it transforms. It becomes a fuel. It becomes a weapon. It becomes a force that works with you instead of against you. The third step, becoming dangerous but disciplined. This is where the true rebellion happens. When you integrate the shadow, you become something rare, a person who is both dangerous and disciplined. Jung believed that true morality is not found in weakness, but in power held under control. The harmless man is not good. He is simply incapable of causing harm. But the man who has confronted his darkness, who understands his capacity for destruction and chooses to wield it responsibly, that man is truly moral. This is what it means to be whole. You are no longer a fragmented being, fighting against yourself. You are complete. You do not repress your rage. You channel it into action. You do not fear your desires. You understand them, control them, misuse them. You do not hide from your own mind. You embrace all of it. And this changes everything. The fourth step, living with no masks. When you integrate the shadow, the need for masks disappears. You no longer need to pretend. You no longer need to perform. You become real. You speak with conviction. You move with certainty. You live in alignment with who you truly are. Not the socially acceptable version of yourself, but the full, unapologetic reality. And people feel this. They recognize it immediately because in a world where everyone is pretending, authenticity is magnetic. People follow those who have faced themselves. People trust those who have nothing to hide. And when you integrate your shadow, this is what you become. A force of nature. A person who is not controlled by their subconscious, but who controls it. A person who has taken back in every part of themselves and forged it into power. The final step, the realization that changes everything. Most people live their entire lives avoiding this journey. They choose comfort over truth. They choose illusion over power. But those who dare to confront their shadow, those who do the work, those who integrate instead of suppress, they wake up to something extraordinary. The realization that the shadow was never the enemy, that it was always the missing piece, and that once you embrace it, once you stop running, once you turn and face yourself fully, you become something that most people will never be, whole. And that's the ultimate rebellion. You have spent your entire life believing a lie, that to be good, you must be harmless, that to be accepted, you must be tame, that to be worthy, you must suppress the parts of you that do not fit the mold. But now you see the truth. Everything you have rejected, the raw instincts, the untamed desires, the aggression, the ambition, the darkness, it was never your weakness. It was your power. You were not meant to be a fragmented being, forever at war with yourself. You were meant to be whole. And that changes everything. The prison you were born in to think about it. From the moment you were a child, you were given a set of rules. Not just rules about right and wrong, but rules about who you were allowed to be. They told you to be kind, but never taught you how to stand up for yourself. They told you to be selfless, but never showed you how to protect your own needs. They told you to be humble, but never encouraged you to embrace your own greatness. And every time you strayed outside these boundaries, you felt guilt. Why? Because society does not want individuals who are truly free. A person who is whole, who has integrated their shadow, is a person who cannot be controlled. They cannot be manipulated by guilt. They cannot be silenced by fear. They cannot be broken by external forces because they have already faced the greatest force of all, themselves. This is why Jung's work remains dangerous even today. Because once you integrate your shadow, once you reclaim the parts of yourself that were taken from you, you no longer need permission to exist. You no longer need external validation to feel worthy. You no longer seek approval because you approve of yourself. And a person who approves of themselves fully and completely is the rarest thing in this world, the death of the false self. This is the final step in shadow integration, the death of your false self, the death of the person, the carefully constructed mask that you built to survive in the world, the one that makes you likable, agreeable, socially acceptable. That version of you must die, not because it is evil, not because it was a mistake, but because it is incomplete. The person who was only ever half of you, the half that played by the rules, the half that kept the peace, the half that made others comfortable. But the other half, the raw, untamed, unfiltered you, was never truly gone, and now you must let it breathe. This does not mean becoming reckless. It does not mean losing control. It means balance. It means no longer rejecting any part of yourself. It means standing at the center of your being, unafraid, knowing that you are both light and darkness, both order and chaos, both creation and destruction. And in that moment, you understand something that most people never will. The greatest power in this world is not perfection. It is wholeness, the realization that sets you free. Once you reach this state, life changes, because suddenly you are no longer bound by the same fears that control others. You do not fear failure because you no longer define yourself by external success. You do not fear rejection because you are already whole within yourself. You do not fear judgment because you understand that those who judge are only projecting their own unintegrated shadows. You become untouchable, not in the sense of arrogance, but in the sense of internal sovereignty. The world can no longer shake you because you have faced the darkest parts of yourself and emerged stronger. And that's the secret power of your shadow. It was never your enemy. It was always the key to your strength, the key to your authenticity, the key to your deepest wisdom. And once you unlock it, you are no longer a person who is trying to be something. You simply are, fully, freely, unapologetically, and that is the ultimate truth.